my name is Hartley Dagador, and you're listening to Wake Up with Wonder podcast, where my daddy shares with you the gift of wonder.
Wow, thank you so much to my beautiful daughter Hartley for that lovely introduction. This is the Wake Up with Wonder podcast, and a fair warning before we get started, today's episode is going to be fun, but it might get a little wild. So if you're open to getting wild, sit on in, open your ears, open your hearts, and let's have fun. Let's get wild together. But before we get started with today's episode, I did want to let you know about the sponsor of this podcast. So the Wake Up with Wonder podcast is 100% sponsored by the Wonders and Friends exclusive VIP community. So the Wonders and Friends community is a community of like-minded individuals, men, women. We're all growing together, leveling up our lives together, becoming closer. It's a virtual community where we share daily positivity. We have daily perspective shifts. We all have different wonders, but the difference is that we keep each other accountable towards acting and taking action on those wonders. The more clear you are on your wonder, then the more success, the better results we're likely to have. And it's been proven that when you have a community behind you, the community can amplify those results, can help you achieve even greater successes. So you can learn more about the Wonders and Friends community. There's a free and paid community over at bit.ly/wonders_friends. And don't worry, I'll link that link in the show notes in case you guys missed it or if you're driving. So if you're a new listener, I'm super excited to have you here. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is the Wake Up with Wonder podcast, and I am your host, Jason B. Godoy. If you're a returning listener, it's an honor to have you back. I understand that time is your most valuable asset, and I intend to make the most of it and only add more value. So on this podcast, we are absolutely truthful. We are acute in getting down to the smallest facts and the smallest feelings. We are applicable. We find applications that suit not only myself, but applications that can suit others, and we seek answers. We believe that knowledge is meaningless without commitment, without action, and without results. And with that being said, the principles of this podcast are that we wonder, and after we wonder, we learn, and after we learn, we take action, and then after the action is when the growing and the expansion occurs. So that is what the podcast is about. Thank you for supporting. Thank you for listening. And if you haven't done so already, before we get started, please just go to iTunes and hit the subscribe button so that you can make sure to get all future upcoming episodes. And you can also learn more about this podcast at wakeupwithwonder.com. All right, welcome back. As we stated at the beginning, we are going to be getting a little bit wild today. It's going to be a fun episode. And at the bare minimum, we're going to be talking about the wild things. So this is episode number 40. I'm excited. It feels great to be moving right along, pushing closer to that landmark episode number 50. But it's not quite time to celebrate yet. So with that being said, this episode number 40 is titled, Why the Wild Things Are. So I'm sure you've heard of the book when you were a child, or even maybe you've read it to your children now, the book Where the Wild Things Are. If you haven't, I'll summarize really quick. It's a book about a little boy. I believe his name is Jack. And Jack, I think he had a confrontation with his mother at the dinner table. It's been a while since I read this book, so don't quote me, but he had a confrontation with his mother at the dinner table, and she sent him to his bedroom early. She didn't let him eat dinner. And then after not having dinner, he basically went to his room, sad, was supposed to go to bed early, but at that point, his imagination took over. His imagination ran wild, and when his imagination took over, his imagination ran wild. All of these angry, all of these dark, negative emotions and feelings came out, which I'm sure happens to all of us, happens to every single one of us, not even going to say most of us. I know for a fact it happens to my kids. If I send them to their room, they go to their room angry, they go to their room frustrated, upset, sad. And in the book, the wild things are the monsters that come out of Jack, and these monsters represent his frustration, they represent his anger, they represent his fear, his sadness. And these monsters in his imagination take him off to a land, a wild land where there's all these sorts of monsters and things, until he comes back home at the end of the book and wakes up in his bed. So that is the book where the wild things are, but today we're going to be talking about why the wild things are. So we know where the wild things are, but I'm not talking about the wild things of the world. I'm not talking about hate. I'm not talking about drugs. I'm not talking about violence. I'm not talking about sex. And I'm not even talking about rock and roll. I'm talking about the wild things that literally reside within each and every one of us. We all experience negative emotions, as I said earlier. And if you're anything like myself, as a child, I was taught to perceive these dark feelings as potentially ungovernable, even dangerous, dark, negative thoughts, feelings. These were things that as a child I was taught I could not control. I was taught that they could have such a strong power to them. They could be such a strong force that was capable of unleashing destruction and causing immense amounts of pain to myself or to other people, whether it was physical or whether it was emotional pain. That's what these negative, dark feelings of anger and sadness were capable of. So, like in the story, those feelings are represented by the wild things, by the beasts, the wild animals, and we all have those beasts inside of us. You literally have a primal beast inside of you that is waiting to be unlocked so that he can truly experience his primal nature, for that matter. Or for you ladies listening, there's a warrior princess inside of you, and she is waiting for the opportunity to where she can just rip off her dress. She can just unleash her inner savage goddess. She can take that makeup and just smudge it into face paint. And these completely true and completely possible versions of ourselves, they reside deep inside of us, in our souls, in our beings. And these versions of ourselves, the savage goddess and the primal beast, they're waiting to be uprooted and to be not only uprooted from within ourselves, from our spirit, but they're waiting to be nurtured and loved. And that is how we're going to connect with them. And that is how we're going to bring them out. And that is how we're going to not necessarily control them, but allow them to serve us. So once this primal beast or the savage warrior goddess has been unlocked from inside of you, from inside of myself, there is no invisible prison anymore. And once that invisible prison has been removed, they're allowed to become all the things that they were destined to be. And the only thing stopping them from becoming that is that specific person. I'm stopping myself from becoming, not necessarily becoming the primal wild animal, the beast, but I'm stopping myself from becoming the whole complete version that of myself, the version that commands respect, the version that commands power, the version that knows the full magnitude of the darkness, the full magnitude of the light, that knows total certainty within himself. And not only are we the ones responsible for not hindering these animals inside of us, these wild things, but we're also the reason that these things are the way they are. So I'd like you to consider, I get it, society influenced us as kids. They manipulated our minds. They told us what to think and how to believe, and we were judged and our feelings were hurt. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that we have dark, heavy feelings and emotions, and they were suppressed by society, but we have the power to choose to no longer suppress them, to uplift them, to experience them, to be them. Well, not really be them, but to feel them and release them. That's the best way to put it. And I get it. Like, don't be hard on yourself. When you grow up, like I said, society conditions us, and it's normal. I literally, as I was typing up the script for this podcast episode, I had a friend come by to my garage. It was a close friend, and he literally told me that, words out of his mouth, I'm quoting him word for word, he is pretty much keeping his anger in check. He said he's keeping his anger in check. His anger at work is not being brought into the household. His anger with his team at work, his frustrations with his coworkers for not meeting their sales quota is being left either at work or being left in his car before it goes into the household. Or even, for that matter, it's probably being left within his being. It's being caged away alongside that beast that we had talked about, that wild animal. And I want to ask you guys a question. If we were to keep continuing to keep these dark, heavy feelings in check, how long would it be until you exploded? Like, seriously, I've exploded myself. I've encountered it. I've experienced it. I've exploded on my children. I've exploded on my ex-wife. It led to a divorce. I exploded on friends. I've lost friendships over this kind of stuff. I've exploded on my own grandmother. Unfortunately, I mean, thank God she didn't even remember she had Alzheimer's, but like, nobody is perfect. We all can explode. And if you still don't believe me that you can manage your feelings and keep them in check, these dark, negative, heavy feelings, I want to pose to you the question, what happens if you keep shit in? Literally. If you don't let shit out, if you just keep shit in, what happens? And literally, shit either explodes into explosive diarrhea and it comes out, or you get so clogged up and so backed up that you need surgery. And hopefully nobody needs surgery to repair their emotions, to reconnect all these broken areas of our life. And the areas of your life might be broken, but you're not broken. I need to make that clear. None of us are broken as humans. And even our emotions, they're not to be repaired. They're completely normal. They're just to be connected and made sense of and turned into a fuel, turned into a power, turned into a fire. And that's the whole point of this whole episode. So for me, like I said, I exploded. It led to a divorce. That was my blow up. And for other people, it might be word vomit. For other people, and for me, that divorce, it required a surgery. Like, I literally had to have a surgery on my elbow from a car accident that resulted from me being sad and depressed through that time after my divorce, and drinking and just not taking care of myself. And it caused me to get into a car accident, break my elbow. It caused me to be in a pretty dark place. And that surgery, in a sense, although it was a physical surgery, it was also a metaphorical surgery on my brain that rewired my brain, that reconnected all those emotions, that reconnected all the parts of me so that I would still be broken. I still have plates inside of me. I still have chipped bones and pieces. But at the same time, I am whole and complete, because now I can experience the full magnitude of the light and the full magnitude of the darkness. But as I was saying, is those blowups, it can come in the form of really anything. Word vomit, self-sabotage, self-hatred, self-loathing, depression, sadness. These blowups come in so many ways because our emotions are just bottled up. So this is where the secret is. This is where the power lies. I'd like to have you consider the possibility that those same negative, dark thoughts, those dark feelings, those wild things that you have inside of you that have been that way for some time now, that you can turn those into a source of power. You can turn those into a fuel. You can turn those into a fire. So once I was finally truthful and honest with myself about all of my experiences, every single experience of darkness, including the negative thoughts I had towards people, including the dark feelings of sadness, of resentment, of anger that I experienced. And I still experience those feelings at times. I'm human. We have triggers, but now I am completely aware of most of these feelings. I am aware of the feeling coming and the feeling going versus the feeling just staying and the feeling just being. And when these feelings are not processed, when they are not worked through, when we simply keep them in check, where are they going? They're going to your being, and they're poisoning your being. And the being that you envision, the being that you see, the being that I envision, the being that I saw myself as 1 year ago, prior to my surgery, was there was definitely a gap. I saw myself as being capable of doing more, as being capable of showing up differently. But because of that emotional poison, that darkness inside, that resentment, that anger, whatever you want to call it, that hatred, all that stuff, that sadness, all those negative, dark, heavy feelings, it really didn't allow my being to be where I thought my being was. It allowed me to just be. And I wasn't performing to the capacity that I thought I could or knew I could. And now looking back at it, 6 months after the surgery, approximately, it's about 6 months now, I just had this conversation with a friend. I am consistent with my commitments. I am committed to things that I never thought I would be committed to, honestly. 1 year with a personal development coach, with a business coach. And last year, I had a 6-month commitment with a different coach who, honestly, I feel more connected to. I feel more aligned with than this coach. But I know that this coach is in my life for a reason, for a purpose, and I know that there's a reason that I am making this 1 year commitment. But the only reason I was able to make such a big commitment of myself was because of my capacity to remove the emotional toxicity. So we have the Wonders and Friends community, and I was in this coach's community, and as a member of his community, I was frustrated by all of the messages, by all of the communication going on in the group. And there was some fun conversations, a lot of positivity, but at the same time, I woke up to 130 messages. I woke up to 250 messages. I woke up to 177 messages on the WhatsApp that we use. And for anybody that uses WhatsApp, that could be tedious. It could be discouraging. It could be frustrating. It could be annoying. It could be depressing if all these people are being positive and completing challenges and doing all these things that you can't do but you want to do, and just scrolling through and seeing that. It could be depressing. So I was ready to literally just give up on my 1 year commitment. I got into those dark feelings that we were talking about earlier. The wild side of me came out. And at the end of my workout, I went hard on the punching bag. I got a good punching session in. And then I got all the darkness out about this group. And I realized that I don't dislike the community. I don't dislike the group. I love every single individual member in this community, in this group. But what I disliked was my inability to participate, my inability to show up in the group. And once I was able to accept that magnitude of darkness, of how much I disliked the group, of how much I hated the group, of how I just literally wanted to quit on the group, I realized that I had nothing to do with the group, and it was not even about the group at all. It was about how I was showing up in the group, how I was presenting myself in the group. And that goes back to the question, why the wild things are. So the reason you're showing up how you are, the reason you are being how you are being, opposed to how you envision yourself being or how you want to be, could very well be because of our inability as humans to embrace the negative, dark emotions, to allow them to come and go. And when they go, to use them as an energy, a fuel for our fire. These negative emotions of anger, of sadness, of fear, they can actually be flipped around into gratitude, into appreciation, into, what's the word I'm looking for? Not commitment, gratitude, appreciation, excitement. They can be flipped around into excitement. And then as we have these positive emotions, we can make new commitments. We can learn to let go of the old and start fresh and start new and grow from there. So my question to you is, why are the wild things in your life the way they are? First off. And secondly, where are the wild things? So actually, let's flip that. Where are the wild things? Obviously, the wild things, they're inside of you. Like we said, the negative, dark emotions. But how are those wild things showing up? How are those wild things being treated? Are those wild things being loved? Are those wild things being cared for? Are those wild things being nurtured? Or are those wild things just being caged away? Are they just being fed food at the end of the day, at the end of your work shift? They're just being tossed the bones. How are you treating these wild things? Because the way you treat these wild things are going to affect the way we show up. That's it. Simple as that. So don't be afraid of the wild things, the negative emotions, the dark emotions, the dark thoughts. We have them, and they can be flipped into good thoughts, into positive emotions, and they can be used as fuel for our fire, as a way to take action. And with that being said, if you guys got value out of today's episode, if you're going to acknowledge your darkness, if you're willing to do the work, to work through your emotions, to become more and to function, to vibrate at a higher frequency, at a higher capacity, then share this on social media. Share this with a friend. If you share it on Instagram, give a shout out to @JasonB Godoy. If you share it on Facebook, give a shout out to Wake Up with Wonder. But yeah, just share it on Instagram. Shout out @JasonB Godoy. Share with your friends. Feel free to hashtag Wake Up with Wonder. And don't be afraid to explore your darkness. I promise you, there's always light on the other side. There's always light at the end of the tunnel. If that's anything that I've learned in the past 2 years, is that there's always light on the other side. And in order to be the light, to be more, we need to go through the tunnel and we need to come out and experience it for ourselves. So I love you guys. That's all I have for you. Thank you so much for sharing this with a friend, for continuing to grow the Wake Up with Wonder movement. And one last way you can do that is by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, an honest 5-star review about your experience, your rating of this podcast and what it has done for you. Thank you. I look forward to connecting with you guys next week on Wonder Wednesday. Have a wonderful day.